There are crimes that shock us, crimes that horrify us, and then there are crimes that do something worse. They make us question everyone we've ever trusted. For 33 years, the Smith family of Millbrook, Michigan lived with an unanswered question. Who killed Amy? For 33 years, they searched for a monster in the shadows, never realizing he was sitting right across from them at the dinner table. This is the story of 14-year-old Amy Lynn Smith, whose life was stolen on a cold October morning in 1979. But more than that, it's the story of how forensic science gave voice to the dead, how one detective refused to let the past stay buried, and how a family learned that sometimes the person you trust most is the one you should fear. Amy Smith was a real person. Her family's grief is real. Their betrayal is real. And the justice they finally received, delayed by more than 3 decades, is real. Let's begin on a morning that seemed like any other, in a town where everyone thought they knew everyone. Millbrook, Michigan, in 1979, was home to 3,200 people. Nestled 40 miles west of Lansing, founded in 1847, it had settled into a comfortable rhythm where change came slowly and tradition ran deep. Main Street formed the commercial heart: Henderson's Hardware, Miller's Pharmacy, the Millbrook Diner with its red vinyl booths, Sal's Barber Shop, and the First National Bank with its 1,892 stone facade. The Rialto Theater showed movies on weekends. Patterson's General Store anchored the South End. The Millbrook Gazette published every Thursday. This was a town where the bank president played poker with the plumber every Tuesday night, where front doors stayed unlocked and children rode bikes until dark, where the biggest crime was usually a knocked-over mailbox. The police force consisted of 7 officers. The 2-cell jail was rarely occupied. The Gazette's police blotter ran reports like, "Suspicious person on Elm Street turned out to be Henderson boy's cousin from Toledo." In October 1979, as maples turned brilliant orange and red, the world outside dealt with bigger concerns. Carter's crisis of confidence speech, OPEC oil restrictions, the brewing Iran hostage crisis. But in Millbrook, people worried about whether the Tigers would make state championships and whether they'd have enough firewood for winter. Against this backdrop of safety and routine, Amy Smith lived her life, a life about to be cut brutally short. The Smith family lived at 847 Maple Street in a 2-story colonial built in 1952. Robert Henry Smith, 39, had worked at the Ford plant in Riverside for 20 years, starting on the assembly line and working up to floor supervisor. Solid, dependable, a creature of habit, up at 5:30 a.m., coffee black, out the door by 6:45, the kind of father who showed love through actions rather than words. Linda Marie Smith, 38, was the family's emotional center. Daughter of Thomas and Irene Walsh, who'd owned Walsh's Hardware, she'd learned both tools and how to talk to people. She volunteered at church, organized the neighborhood watch, served on the PTA. Quick laugh, natural warmth, tendency to see the best in everyone. Their son, Thomas Tommy to everyone, was 11 that October. Small for his age, with his father's quiet nature and mother's brown eyes. He loved reading, was terrible at sports but tried anyway, and worshipped his older sister. And then there was Amy Lynn Smith, born the 22nd of March 1965, was 14 that autumn. 9th grade at Millbrook High, she looked like her mother, same brown eyes, easy smile, the way she tilted her head when thinking. Long blonde hair she perfected in Farrah Fawcett's feathered style. About 5'4", slender, with energy that made her seem in constant motion. Popular without being part of the popular crowd, Amy had a wide circle of friends. Her best friend was Sarah Mitchell from Oak Street. They'd been inseparable since 3rd grade. Marathon phone conversations every night about boys, music, teachers, parents. Amy was a solid B student who loved biology and hated algebra. "When am I ever going to need to know what X equals?" she'd complain. Outside school, her passion was animals. At 12, she'd started volunteering at Dr. Morrison's veterinary clinic on Saturday mornings. She'd found her calling. She wanted to be a veterinarian. Dr. Morrison had told her parents she had real potential. "She's got that rare combination of compassion and scientific curiosity. She doesn't just love animals, she wants to understand them." Amy saved money from babysitting for her college fund. She'd researched programs, knew Michigan State had one of the best, calculated that with hard work she might make it happen. She had plans, dreams, a future stretching out with all the promise 14-year-old futures hold. The family had dinner together every night at 6 p.m., sharp Linda's rule. Weekends meant Methodist church, Sunday mornings, 4th row, left side. It was a good life. Simple. The kind millions of American families lived. Unremarkable in its everydayness. Precious in its stability. And it was all about to end. David Michael Walsh, born the 14th of June, 1945, was Linda's younger brother by 3 years. They'd been close in the way small-town siblings often are, allies, partners, confidants. Good-looking in his youth, dark hair, blue eyes, easy smile. Athletic in high school, popular enough for student council. After graduating in 1963, he'd gone to work for Miller Construction Company, starting as a laborer and working up to crew supervisor over 15 years. The work paid well enough for him to buy a modest ranch on Elm Street, just 4 blocks from his sister's family. David never married. When asked about settling down, he'd shrug. "Haven't met the right person yet." Socially acceptable in 1979 for a bachelor in his 30s. To the Smith family, David was simply Uncle David, constant, reliable. He showed up for Tommy's Little League games, took Amy to father-daughter events when Robert worked late, helped with home repairs, there for birthdays with thoughtful gifts, there for holidays, there for Sunday dinners so regularly that Linda often set his place without asking. "David's good with the kids," Linda would tell Robert. "They're lucky to have an uncle who cares so much." David spent hours with Tommy, teaching football, showing him tools. With Amy, he was gentle and attentive, asking about school, offering rides, showing interest in her veterinarian dreams. "You're going to be great at that," he'd tell her. "You've got a real way with animals." Amy would beam, soaking up attention from the uncle she adored. Sometimes David would offer to drive Amy to school. "No sense in her walking when I'm heading that direction anyway." Amy never minded. She liked riding in David's truck, liked feeling grown up. It all seemed so normal, so innocent, so wholesome. That was the thing about David Walsh. He didn't seem like a monster. He seemed like a good man, devoted uncle, caring brother. He fit seamlessly into the Smith family's fabric. And that's exactly what made him so dangerous. Looking back through police reports and testimonies, certain patterns emerged regarding David Walsh's behavior, but these patterns were only visible in retrospect. Dr. Richard Klein, a forensic psychologist later consulted on the case, explained, "Sexual predators targeting children within their own family are extraordinarily skilled at normalization. They establish patterns that don't raise red flags. By the time inappropriate behavior occurs, the groundwork has been so carefully laid that victims may not recognize it as wrong, or are too confused or afraid to speak up." David Walsh was, by all accounts, a master of this. He'd started coming around more frequently in 1977 and 1978 as Amy entered adolescence. He began showing particular interest in Amy's activities and scheduled detailed questions about her school day, friends, plans. He'd offer to drive her places. Linda appreciated the help. He gave Amy gifts slightly too personal, a necklace for her 13th birthday that Linda thought perhaps too grown up, a diary with a lock, clothes that were fashionable but mature. He began making comments about Amy's appearance, how pretty she was getting, how boys were probably noticing. Comments that made Amy simultaneously flattered and vaguely uncomfortable. He created opportunities to be alone with Amy, timing visits for when Amy might be home alone. In later interviews, Sarah Mitchell would remember disturbing conversations. Amy told me Uncle David sometimes made her feel weird. She couldn't explain it. Said he'd look at her uncomfortably, touch her shoulder or back in ways that felt wrong but couldn't say why. He'd ask strange questions about boyfriends, about kissing, about her changing body. Amy didn't like those questions, but she said he was probably just being an uncle. She felt bad for being uncomfortable. This was the insidious genius of David Walsh's approach. He created situations where any discomfort Amy felt was immediately undermined by guilt. He was so nice, so generous, how could she feel weird? He was family. When Amy tried once to tell her mother Uncle David's questions made her uncomfortable, Linda responded with well-meaning dismissal. Uncle David cares about you, sweetheart. He just wants to make sure you're growing up okay. And Amy, like countless other victims of familial abuse, learned to suppress her instincts, to normalize the abnormal. By October 1979, David Walsh had spent months grooming Amy Smith. He'd established unlimited access, created situations for isolation, normalized inappropriate contact, ensured Amy would doubt her own discomfort. He'd positioned himself as indispensable to the Smith family, so thoroughly woven into their daily lives that his presence was expected, welcomed, unremarkable. This wasn't a stranger lurking in shadows. This was family. This was trust. And that's exactly what David Walsh had been counting on. Monday, the 15th of October, 1979, began like thousands of Monday mornings before it. Robert's alarm went off at 5:30 a.m. He started the coffee, retrieved the Gazette, settled at the kitchen table. The Tigers had beaten Riverside 21-14. Tommy would be excited. At 6:45, Robert left for work. The drive to the Ford plant took 30 minutes. Clear, cool October morning. Leaves at peak, brilliant reds, oranges, yellows. Back at 847 Maple Street, Linda woke the kids. Tommy groaned his usual 5 more minutes protest. Amy was already awake, staring at the ceiling. Downstairs, Linda started Monday pancakes, a tradition that had persisted. Tommy poured Cheerios instead. Amy came down at 7:15, picked at her pancakes while reading her English textbook, some quiz today she hadn't studied enough for. "Did you finish your homework?" "Most of it," Amy replied, which Linda knew meant no, not really. Amy finished breakfast, went upstairs to perfect her hair, returned at 7:35 with her purple JanSport backpack covered in Patch's veterinary clinic, eye animals, smiley faces, peace signs. "Do you have lunch money?" "No, I need $1. Linda handed her a crisp bill. "Don't lose it." "I won't. Have a good day. I love you." "Love you too, Mom." Amy leaned in, kissed Linda's cheek, a gesture Linda would replay 10,000 times, searching for any sign of what was about to happen. Amy walked to the front door, shouldered her backpack, called out, "I'm leaving. See you after school." Linda called back. The front door opened, closed. It was 7:42 a.m. Amy Lynn Smith walked out into a cool October morning and into the last hour of her life. At 7:43 a.m., Mrs. Eleanor Henderson was watering her petunias. She saw Amy walk past, heading toward school. They waved. Amy smiled, humming something maybe, "Too Much Heaven," by the Bee Gees. That was the last confirmed sighting of Amy Smith alive by anyone other than her killer. Amy's route was straightforward. 8 blocks from home to Millbrook High. 15 minutes at her typical pace. She should have arrived by 8 a.m. Amy didn't arrive. At 8:17 a.m., Mrs. Peterson marked Amy Smith absent in first period English. At 12:30 p.m., during lunch, Sarah Mitchell went looking for Amy. When she couldn't find her anywhere, Sarah asked around. No one had seen Amy all day. At 2:15 p.m., when school let out, Sarah walked to the Smith house. "Hi, Sarah. Amy's not home yet. Did you need something?" Sarah felt cold dread. "Mrs. Smith, Amy wasn't at school today." Linda's smile faded. "What do you mean?" "She was marked absent first period. No one saw her all day. She left for school this morning. I saw her leave at 7:42. She never got there, Mrs. Smith." Linda called Dr. Morrison at the veterinary clinic. He hadn't seen Amy since Saturday. She called Amy's friends, the school office. No one had seen her. By 3:15 p.m., Linda's concern had grown into solid fear. She called Robert at work. "Robert, Amy didn't show up at school today." Despite his reassuring words, Robert felt his own fear building. He left work early. By 4:30 p.m., Robert gave up on waiting. He called the Millbrook Police Department. The call was logged at 4:33 p.m. Robert Smith, 847 Maple Street, reporting daughter missing. Officer James Wright took the call. In Millbrook, missing person reports usually resolved within an hour. But he dispatched Officer Tom Bradley to the Smith residence. At 5:15 p.m., Bradley took down details. Linda described what Amy was wearing: pink t-shirt, blue jeans, white Converse sneakers, her purple backpack with the animal patches. She was wearing her silver locket, the one my mother gave her for her 13th birthday. By 6:30 p.m., as darkness fell, the Millbrook Police Department had mobilized every available officer. Chief William Harris understood that first hours were critical. "She's been missing almost 11 hours now. We need to find her before dark." By 7 p.m., word had spread through Millbrook. By 8 p.m., over 200 volunteers had gathered at the Methodist Church. Chief Harris divided them into search teams. They carried flashlights, called Amy's name into October darkness. At the Smith house, Linda sat by the phone, praying it would ring. Robert paced. Tommy sat on the stairs, small and scared and confused. And David Walsh arrived at 8:30 p.m., letting himself in, rushing to embrace his sister, who collapsed into tears. "We'll find her," David said, holding Linda as she sobbed. "I promise you, Linda, we'll find her." David Walsh, who knew exactly where Amy Smith was, who had put her there that morning, held his sister and lied to her face with sincerity that would have fooled anyone. "I'm going to join the search," David said. "I'll do everything I can." And David Walsh, Amy's killer, walked out into the October night to help search for the girl he had murdered. For 3 days, Millbrook became possessed by a single purpose: find Amy Smith. The search continued around the clock in shifts. They searched every street, every yard, every business. They walked paths through woods, waded through Mill Creek, followed up on every possible sighting. The Millbrook Gazette ran Amy's school photo on the front page. Local businesses closed so employees could help. Churches coordinated meal services. The diner stayed open 24 hours. At the Smith house, people came and went constantly. Neighbors brought food Linda couldn't eat. Family arrived from out of town. And David Walsh was there, almost constantly, helping coordinate volunteers, checking with search teams, reassuring his sister. Linda would lie awake thinking about the 8 blocks between her house and the school. 15 minutes. How does someone just Disappear. Tommy stopped talking. He'd sit watching everything with wide, scared eyes. On October 17th, search teams held a meeting at the church. Over 300 people attended. "We've covered the town thoroughly," Chief Harris told the crowd. "Tomorrow, we expand to areas outside of town. The woods, the farmland, the old quarry." David Walsh volunteered immediately. "I know those woods. I played there as a kid. I can help navigate." As the meeting broke up, David pulled Chief Harris aside. "What are you thinking, Bill? Do you think she's still alive?" Chief Harris said carefully, "After 3 days, the chances aren't good. You should prepare your sister. I keep hoping she just ran away. Usually there are signs, a fight, trouble at school. From what we've learned, Amy was happy. Normal. Then, what do you think happened?" "I think someone took her. I think someone grabbed her on her way to school." "You think she's dead?" David finished. "I hope I'm wrong." "Me too," David said, and the grief in his voice sounded completely genuine. "God, me too." The next morning, Thursday, October 18th, jogger Dennis Cooper set out for his usual run along Mill Creek. At approximately 7:15 a.m., about a quarter mile into the woods, Dennis noticed something out of place, a pile of fallen leaves and branches that looked too deliberately arranged. He stepped off the path and saw fabric beneath the leaves. Pink fabric. Dennis Cooper, who'd taught Amy Smith just last year, saw what was under those leaves and started screaming. Within 15 minutes, Chief Harris and Detective Frank Morrison were on the scene. Amy Lynn Smith lay on her back, partially covered by fallen branches and autumn leaves, still wearing her pink t-shirt and blue jeans, though both were torn and stained. Her white Converse sneakers were missing. Her purple backpack was nowhere to be seen. The silver locket was gone. Detective Frank Morrison had been with the department since 1967. He'd seen tragedy, but never anything like this. Never a homicide. Never the murder of a child. Morrison secured the scene, called the state police for assistance. While waiting, he documented what he could see. The location was 150 yards from the main trail, in a depressed area surrounded by oak and maple trees. The ground was ankle-deep in fallen leaves. The body's position suggested it had been placed rather than dumped. Amy lay on her back, arms at her sides, legs straight. The leaves and branches had been placed with care enough to conceal, but not completely hide. Morrison noted signs of violence even from limited examination. Bruising on her neck, defensive wounds on her arms. Amy Smith had not died peacefully. The forensic team from Michigan State Police arrived at 9:30 a.m., led by Dr. Walter Brennan. They photographed everything, marked distances, created a grid, collected evidence. After extensive documentation, Dr. Brennan approached the body. Female, appears to be early to mid-teens, consistent with the description, visible signs of trauma. Ligature marks on the neck, significant bruising, clothing torn, evidence of sexual assault apparent. Morrison's jaw clenched. This was murder. This was sexual assault and murder of a 14-year-old girl. Time of death difficult to determine precisely. Based on rigor mortis and decomposition, I'd estimate death occurred between 60 and 80 hours ago, consistent with Monday morning. Monday morning. Amy Smith had died within hours of leaving her house. Hours of kissing her mother goodbye. Crime scene technicians worked throughout the day. They found partial footprints, but multiple days of searchers had contaminated the area. They found broken branches, candy wrappers, cigarette butts. All might be evidence or ordinary litter. What they didn't find was the murder weapon, her backpack, her sneakers, or her locket. They didn't find any clear evidence that pointed definitively to a suspect. By 4 p.m., Amy's body was transported to Lansing for autopsy. The area was sealed with police tape. Morrison drove back to the station, mind working through what he knew. The location was secluded, but not unknown. The missing personal items suggested trophies. The sexual assault suggested a predatory motive. Someone had targeted Amy or taken advantage of opportunity. This wasn't random. This was planned. Morrison began constructing a mental profile. Male, almost certainly. Someone familiar with Millbrook, with Amy's routine, with the woods. Strong enough to overpower a 14-year-old girl. Calm enough to carefully position the body. Someone who was probably still in Millbrook, possibly even participating in the search. That last thought made Morrison's blood run cold. Chief Harris insisted on being the one to tell the Smith family. Morrison accompanied him. They arrived at 847 Maple Street at 5:15 p.m. The house was full of people. Robert opened the door. Morrison saw the exact moment when Robert knew. "No," Robert said, barely audible. "No, please." They went upstairs to the master bedroom. "We found Amy," Chief Harris said. "I'm so very sorry, but she's gone. Amy is dead." Linda Smith made a sound Morrison would never forget, a keening wail of pure anguish. She collapsed, and Robert caught her, and they held each other while their world fell apart. After several minutes, Chief Harris continued, "I need to tell you that Amy was the victim of violence. Someone did this to her." "Who?" Robert asked, voice rough with tears. "Who would do this?" "We don't know yet, but we will find who did this." Morrison asked questions. Anyone who made Amy uncomfortable? Anyone inappropriate? Any new people in the neighborhood? The answer to everything was no. Amy had been normal, happy. No warning signs. "We'll need someone to formally identify the body," Morrison said. "I'll do it," Robert said. "Not Linda. I'll do it." Downstairs, the house waited in terrible silence. When Robert and Linda came down, their faces told the story. The silence broke into collective grief. David Walsh was sitting in the living room. When he saw his sister's face, he stood, his own face crumbling. "No. Please. No." Linda collapsed into her brother's arms. "She's gone, David. Amy's gone. Someone killed her." David held his sister while she sobbed. Over Linda's shoulder, Morrison watched David Walsh's face. The man looked genuinely devastated. Morrison filed that observation away. The house filled with more people. Pastor Richards arrived. Food appeared. Tommy came down, understanding something terrible had happened but unable to grasp its permanence. Robert had to tell his son that Amy was gone, that someone had killed her. Morrison left around 9 p.m., exhausted and emotionally drained. He was now responsible for finding justice for Amy Smith. Dr. Walter Brennan conducted Amy Smith's autopsy on Friday, October 19th. Morrison attended, forcing himself to watch, to learn. This was evidence. The autopsy revealed the extent of Amy's injuries. She had been beaten bruises on her face, ribs, arms. Defensive wounds showed she'd tried to fight off her attacker. The ligature marks were deep, indicating sustained pressure. Evidence of violent sexual assault was collected for analysis. Amy had a fractured rib, internal bruising, but the cause of death was clear: asphyxiation due to strangulation. Time of death is estimated between 8 and 10 a.m. on Monday, October 15th. Dr. Brennan concluded. Death would not have been instantaneous. The strangulation was sustained over several minutes. Morrison felt sick. Amy Smith had spent her last minutes knowing she was being killed. The findings established key facts. Amy had been murdered through strangulation, probably with cord or rope. She had been brutally sexually assaulted. She had fought back. Based on stomach contents, death occurred 1 to 3 hours after her last meal. The injuries suggested someone enraged, violent, but the careful body positioning suggested someone who could regain control afterward. Amy Smith's funeral was held Monday, October 22nd, exactly 1 week after she disappeared. The Methodist Church was packed over 800 people. The closed casket sat at the front, covered with flowers. Pastor Richards tried to make sense of senseless tragedy. Linda sat in the front pew, held upright by Robert and her brother David. Tommy sat small and lost. After the service, they drove to Millbrook Cemetery. At the graveside, Linda finally broke, collapsing onto the grass, screaming Amy's name. It took Robert and David both to help her back up. David Walsh, standing beside his sister's grief, was the picture of a devastated uncle. He'd helped plan the funeral, helped choose flowers, helped Robert make all the terrible decisions. Detective Morrison attended, watching mourners for anything suspicious. He watched David Walsh comfort his sister, help carry Amy's casket. Nothing about Walsh's behavior struck Morrison as suspicious. He seemed genuinely devastated. Morrison had no reason to suspect the helpful, caring uncle, and that would be his biggest regret for the next 33 years. In the following weeks, Morrison and his team conducted hundreds of interviews. They developed a list of potential suspects. The first serious suspect was Gary Williams, a registered sex offender who'd moved to Millbrook in April 1979. His criminal history made him obvious, but witnesses placed Williams at the local diner at 8:15 a.m. on October 15th. The timing didn't work. Morrison crossed Williams off his list. 3 weeks later, Pete Kowalski walked into the police station and confessed. He was mentally ill. His story detailed, but ultimately false. He couldn't accurately describe Amy beyond newspaper photos, couldn't describe the crime scene location, had no idea about Amy's missing items. After 6 hours, it became clear Kowalski hadn't killed Amy Smith. Other suspects followed, each investigated, each eliminated. By Christmas 1979, Morrison had interviewed over 300 people, followed up on 127 tips, pursued every lead, and he was no closer to identifying Amy's killer. As standard procedure, Morrison requested blood samples from family members for elimination purposes. In 1979, blood typing could narrow suspect pools but couldn't definitively identify individuals. Most family members provided samples immediately in early November. Robert Smith came in November 3rd, Linda Smith November 4th, Linda's parents November 5th and 6th. David Walsh didn't come in. Morrison called, left messages, drove to Walsh's house. On November 19th, Walsh finally called. "Sorry I haven't gotten back to you. Work's been crazy. I'm actually out of town right now, on a job site in Grand Rapids. Won't be back until after Thanksgiving. When you get back, first thing, I need you to come in. Absolutely, soon as I'm back in town." Morrison noted the delay, but didn't think much of it. Walsh had a legitimate excuse. And besides, Walsh wasn't a suspect. He was family. David Walsh returned December 2nd and called Morrison the next day. At 2 p.m. on December 3rd, 1979, David Walsh walked into the Millbrook police station, friendly and cooperative. The blood draw took 5 minutes. Morrison asked routine questions. "Where were you on the morning of October 15th?" "I was supposed to be at work, but I called in sick. Wasn't feeling great. I was home all morning." "Anyone who can verify that?" "Nah, I live alone. But I called my supervisor at Miller Construction around 8 a.m. He can verify that." "Thanks for your cooperation," Morrison said. "Anything to help catch this bastard," Walsh said, voice thick with emotion. Amy was special. She didn't deserve what happened to her. David Walsh left. The blood sample was labeled, logged, and placed in evidence storage, and there it sat. By December 1979, Morrison had moved on to other suspects. Walsh's blood sample, collected for elimination purposes, was filed away with other family samples. It was never tested, never compared to crime scene evidence, never analyzed. The samples sat in evidence storage in a small brown glass vial labeled D. Walsh. Elimination sample, the 3rd of December 2079. It would sit there, untouched, for 33 years. As 1,979 became 1,980, the investigation lost momentum. The physical evidence had been analyzed as thoroughly as 1,970 seconds technology allowed, yielding no definitive answers. Type O, blood type, 45% of the population. Brown hair could be anyone. Blue cotton fibers, possibly from work pants. None of it led to an arrest. Morrison became obsessed. He'd lie awake at night running through evidence, searching for the pattern he'd missed. In March 1980, Chief Harris called him in. "Frank, we need to start scaling back. We've done everything we can with current technology. Maybe someday, when forensic science advances, we'll be able to get more from the evidence." Morrison knew Harris was right, but it felt like betrayal. The Amy Smith case was moved to cold case files in June 1980. Morrison kept her file in his office, continued reviewing it, hoping for a break that never came. Every October 15th, the Millbrook Gazette would run a story. Morrison would say all the appropriate things about how the case remained open, how they'd never give up. But privately, he knew the truth. Without new evidence or technology, Amy Smith's killer would never be caught. The years rolled by. The case receded into Millbrook's collective memory. Morrison watched the Smith family try to rebuild. Robert took early retirement in 1985. Linda slowly emerged from depression but never fully recovered her warmth. Tommy grew up haunted, struggled through high school, left Millbrook for college, and never moved back. And David Walsh remained a constant presence in his sister's life, there for holidays, birthdays, Sunday dinners, always supportive, always caring, always the devoted brother helping his sister cope. Morrison had verified Walsh's alibi. Walsh had called in sick, claimed to be home alone. His supervisor confirmed the sick call around 8 a.m. It wasn't strong, but it wasn't suspicious either. Walsh had been cooperative, helpful, appropriately emotional. Nothing triggered Morrison's investigative instincts. In 1985, Detective Frank Morrison retired at 53, burned out, haunted by his failure. He moved to Florida, trying to leave behind the cold case that had consumed him. But he never forgot Amy Smith. Every October 15th, he'd call the department and ask for developments. The answer was always no. By 1990, most original investigators had retired. By 2000, the case was 21 years old. Evidence boxes had been moved from building to building. Some evidence was lost, misfiled, mislabeled, but core evidence remained. Amy's clothing, forensic samples, blood samples from family members, including David Walsh's untested sample, still in its brown glass vial, labeled the 3rd of December, 1979. Robert died in 2006 of a heart attack. Linda remained in Millbrook, unable to leave. Tommy, now in his 40s, lived in Chicago, called his mother weekly but rarely visited. And David Walsh, now in his 60s, remained Linda's constant. He was her only nearby family, the only person who truly understood her grief. He helped maintain her house, drove her to appointments, kept her company on anniversaries of Amy's death. They'd sit together on October 15th each year, marking another year without answers. "I wish we knew who did it," Linda would say. And David Walsh, sitting beside his sister, would say, "I know, Linda. I wish we knew too." If you've stayed with Amy's story this far and want to see how science finally solved a case that seemed impossible, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. What happens next proves that some voices, even after decades of silence, refuse to be forgotten. November 2012. Detective Sarah Chen, 34, was a 14-year veteran of the Michigan State Police. In June 2012, she'd been promoted to the cold case unit dedicated to reviewing unsolved homicides using modern forensic techniques. Chen's assignment: identify cases where evidence existed that could be reanalyzed with modern technology and bring closure to families waiting decades for answers. On a cold Tuesday morning in November, Chen pulled case file 79 to 284 from storage. The murder of Amy Lynn Smith, Millbrook, Michigan, October 1979. Chen had been born in 1978, 1 year before Amy's murder. She had no connection to Millbrook. To her, this was another opportunity to bring justice to a victim who'd been waiting over 30 years. The more Chen read, the more the case intrigued her. Thorough 1,970 seconds investigation. But the technology wasn't sufficient to identify the killer from biological evidence collected. In 2012, that had changed. Chen pulled evidence box 79284 from storage. Inside, Amy's torn clothing, soil samples, fingernail scrapings, and most importantly, fabric swabs from Amy's body that had tested positive for semen in 1979. Chen took the evidence to the forensic laboratory. "It's going to be degraded," the chief DNA analyst warned. 3 decades of storage damages DNA. We might not get a complete profile. Can you try? We can try. 3 weeks later, the analyst called Chen into the lab. "We got something. A partial profile, 13 usable markers instead of 16. But it's enough." Chen felt excitement surge. "Can you run it through CODIS?" "Already did. No matches." No match meant Amy's killer had never been arrested for a felony or had died before DNA collection became standard. But Chen wasn't giving up. She went back to the case file, creating a spreadsheet of every male interviewed during the 1979 investigation. Chen noticed something interesting. In November 1979, Morrison had collected blood samples from family members for elimination purposes. Most had provided samples immediately. But David Walsh, Linda Smith's brother, hadn't provided his sample until the 3rd of December 1979, nearly a month after the initial request. Morrison's notes indicated Walsh had been out of town for work. What caught Chen's attention was a notation. Blood sample collected the 3rd of December 2079, filed with elimination samples. Chen cross-referenced with evidence analysis reports. Robert Smith's blood sample had been tested. Linda Smith's had been tested. Linda's parents had been tested. But David Walsh's sample? No record of it being tested. No analysis report. No comparison to crime scene evidence. Chen felt her pulse quicken. An untested family sample. A male family member who'd had access to Amy, who knew her routine, who delayed providing his sample. She searched evidence storage for original blood samples. Many had been discarded over the years, but some remained. And there, in a small brown glass vial, labeled in careful handwriting, was David Walsh's blood sample from the 3rd of December 1979. Chen stared at the vial. This sample was 33 years old. The chances of extracting usable DNA weren't great, but she had to try. "This is a long shot," she told the analyst, "but I need you to try to extract DNA from this blood sample and compare it to the profile we got from the crime scene." The analyst examined the vial blood, separated over decades. Serum yellowish, cellular component dark sediment at bottom. "This is really old. Storage conditions weren't optimal. I can try, but don't get your hopes up." "Just try," Chen said. The extraction took 2 days. Chen spent those days researching David Walsh, born the 14th of June, 1945. Lived in Millbrook his entire life. Worked for Miller Construction for over 40 years, retiring in 2007. Never married, no children. Lived alone on Elm Street. Chen found Morrison's interview notes. Walsh had claimed he was homesick the 15th of October, 1979. Called in sick around 8 a.m. No one could verify he lived alone. It was a weak alibi. But Morrison apparently hadn't found it suspicious. Walsh was family. Helpful. Cooperative. Appropriately emotional. On the 26th of November 2012, the DNA analyst called Chen into the lab. "You need to see this." On the computer screen were 2 DNA profiles side by side. The profile from the crime scene, 13 markers, partially degraded but readable. And the profile from David Walsh's blood sample, clear, complete, unmistakable. "They match," the analyst said. "All 13 markers match perfectly. The probability of this being a coincidence is approximately 1 in 574 billion. Chen stared at the screen, heart pounding. After 33 years, Amy Smith had finally identified her killer. David Walsh, Linda Smith's beloved brother, Amy's trusted uncle, the man who'd carried her coffin, was Amy Smith's murderer. Chen spent 2 weeks building a case that would hold up in court. She verified Walsh's alibi from the 15th of October, 1979. Miller Construction records showed Walsh had called in sick at 8:07 a.m. But here's what made Chen's blood run cold. On October 15, Walsh's crew had been scheduled to work in Riverside, 30 miles from Millbrook. Walsh's normal commute would have taken him in the opposite direction from Amy's school. There was no reason for Walsh to be anywhere near Amy's route that morning, unless he deliberately positioned himself there. Chen pulled Walsh's work records for weeks leading up to October 15. A pattern emerged. In September and early October 1979, Walsh had taken several personal days and sick days more than usual. September 12, 19, 26, and October 3, all school days. All days when Amy would have been walking to school. Had David Walsh been watching Amy? Studying her routine? Planning? Walsh's home address, 423 Elm Street. Just 4 blocks from 847 Maple Street. Walking distance less than 10 minutes. Chen mapped the route from Walsh's house to Mill Creek. Approximately 1 mile, easily walkable in 15 to 20 minutes. If Walsh had murdered Amy between 8 and 9 a.m., he could have been back home by 9:30. The timeline was damning. 7:42 a.m. Amy leaves home. 7:43 a.m. Last sighting by Mrs. Henderson. 8:07 a.m. David Walsh calls in sick from home. 8 to 9 a.m. Amy is murdered. No alibi. Walsh claims home alone. No one can verify. Chen reviewed Morrison's original interview transcripts. In his the 20th of October, 1979 interview, Walsh had mentioned that Amy always carried that purple backpack, but Amy's purple backpack had never been found. The only way Walsh could have known about it was if he'd seen Amy with it on October 15 or if he'd taken it after killing her. Chen interviewed people who'd known Walsh in 1979. Margaret Henderson, who'd lived next door, remembered. He did seem more distracted than usual in those weeks. I'd see him standing in his yard, staring off, and he started going out more at night, which wasn't like him. He was usually a homebody. I figured maybe he'd met a woman. Or maybe he'd been driving around, watching Amy. Chen interviewed longtime Millbrook residents who confirmed Walsh had played in the Mill Creek woods as a child. "We all did," said Robert Patterson. "That was our playground. We knew every trail, every hiding spot. David especially, he was always wandering off into the woods. By mid-December 2012, Chen had built a comprehensive case. DNA, evidence, perfect match, probability of coincidence, 1 inch, 574 billion. Opportunity, no verifiable alibi. Claimed home, sick but lived alone. Geographic access, lived 4 blocks from Amy's home. Knew Mill Creek area intimately. Suspicious statements. Mentioned Amy's purple backpack that was never found. Pattern of behavior. Multiple unexplained days off work in weeks before murder. Delayed cooperation. Delayed providing blood sample nearly a month. Chen presented findings to the county prosecutor. The DNA is strong, he said. Combined with the circumstantial evidence, this is prosecutable. So you'll charge him? Yes, but first I want you to interview Walsh. Get him on record. Maybe he'll confess. The interview was scheduled for the 28th of November 2012, the day before Thanksgiving. The 28th of November, 2012, 6:47 a.m. Detective Sarah Chen and 2 Michigan State police officers pulled up to 423 Elm Street in Millbrook. Cold morning. The kind of Michigan November cold that cuts through clothing. The house was modest, neatly maintained. Chen walked to the front door, heart pounding. She knocked. David Walsh opened the door in pajamas and bathrobe, reading glasses around his neck. At 67, he looked like any grandfather, gray hair, slight stoop. Nothing suggested he was capable of murder. Yes? Walsh said, blinking. Can I help you? Chen held up her badge. Mr. Walsh, I'm Detective Chen with the Michigan State Police Cold Case Unit. We need to talk to you about Amy Smith. Chen watched Walsh's face. She saw it, a barely perceptible flash. Fear, resignation. For a fraction of a second, Walsh's mask slipped. He knew why they were here. But then, the mask returned. Amy, has something happened? Have you found new evidence? May we come in? Walsh hesitated. Of course, he said finally. The interior was neat, almost Spartan. Minimal furniture, little decoration. No family photos, no personal mementos. Mr. Walsh, we'd like you to come to the police station to answer some questions, Chen said. Am I under arrest? Not at this time, but we have new evidence in Amy's case we need to discuss. What kind of evidence? We'd prefer to discuss that at the station. Walsh nodded slowly. Let me get dressed. Officer Martinez will accompany you. While Walsh got dressed, Chen noticed a hallway to the bedroom. A closet door, slightly ajar. I'm going to secure the premises, Chen told Officer Brooks. She walked down the hallway, hand instinctively moving to her service weapon. The bedroom was Spartan. The closet door was partially open. Chen pushed it open fully. At first, she saw what you'd expect. Hanging clothes, shoes, a shelf with sweaters and boxes. But then, she saw the wooden box. Small wooden box, shoebox sized, pushed back behind winter coats. Chen pulled on latex gloves and carefully pulled it out. It wasn't locked. The lid lifted easily. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, were 3 items. A purple JanSport backpack with patches from the veterinary clinic. Faded but intact, preserved carefully. A set of house keys on a small heart-shaped keychain. And a silver locket on a delicate chain. Chen stared at the contents, hands trembling. These were Amy Smith's belongings, missing from the crime scene for 33 years. Items only the killer would have. And they'd been maintained, preserved. The locket had been polished, it gleamed. The backpack had been protected. These weren't forgotten trophies hastily hidden. These were treasures. keepsakes. Evidence of an obsession lasting 33 years. Detective? Officer Brooks called. Walsh is ready. Chen carefully closed the box and carried it out. Walsh was standing in the living room, dressed in jeans and flannel shirt. He saw the box in Chen's hands, and his face went completely white. "David Walsh," Chen said, her voice hard. "You're under arrest for the murder of Amy Lynn Smith." The Millbrook Police Department interview room had video recording systems. David Walsh was led into interview room 2 at 9:47 a.m. He'd been read his Miranda rights. He'd waived his right to an attorney, saying he had nothing to hide. Chen let him sit alone for 15 minutes. Let suspects stew in their anxiety. At 10:02 a.m., Chen entered, carrying the wooden box. She set it on the table between them, not opening it yet. "Mr. Walsh, this interview is being video recorded. Do you understand?" Walsh nodded, eyes fixed on the wooden box. "For the record, please state your name and date of birth." "David Michael Walsh, le 14 juin 1945. You understand you're under arrest for the murder of Amy Lynn Smith?" "Yes." "And you've waived your right to an attorney?" "Yes." "I don't need an attorney. I didn't do anything wrong." Chen noted the present tense. "Mr. Walsh, we have DNA evidence that proves you killed Amy Smith in 1979. The blood sample you provided in December 1979 has been analyzed. It's a perfect match to the semen found on Amy's body. The probability of this being anyone other than you is 1 in 574 billion. Walsh stared at the box. "We also found these items in your home this morning." Chen opened the box, removing each item. The purple backpack, the house keys, the silver locket. These have been missing since Amy's murder. Only the killer would have them. Walsh's eyes filled with tears. His hand shook. "The only way you could have these is if you took them from Amy, and the only way you could have taken them is if you were there when she died. If you're the one who killed her." Silence filled the room. "Mr. Walsh, you've been carrying this secret for 33 years. That must have been exhausting." Walsh's chest moved rapidly, breathing quick and shallow. Chen could see him struggling. Continued denial versus the relief of confession. "I think part of you wants to tell the truth. The DNA evidence proves you killed Amy. That's not in question. What is in question is why. What happened that morning?" Walsh closed his eyes. Tears ran down his cheeks. "She was going to tell," he whispered. "This was it. This was the confession." "Tell us what happened, David." And David Walsh, who had successfully hidden his crime for 33 years, finally broke. "I didn't mean for it to happen. I never meant to hurt her. I loved Amy." "Then why did you kill her?" Walsh was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was flat, emotionless. "It started about a year before. I started noticing Amy differently. She was growing up, becoming a young woman. I tried to fight it. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't stop thinking about her." Chen kept her face neutral. This was the confession they needed. "I started spending more time at Linda's house, finding excuses to be around Amy. I told myself I was just being a good uncle, but I knew what I was really doing." "You were grooming her." "I didn't think of it that way. I thought if I could just get close enough to her, if I could make her understand what I felt was special, that she'd want you." "Yes." "Did you ever touch her inappropriately before October 15th? Walsh shook his head. "I wanted to, but I never did. I was too afraid she'd tell. So I just watched her. I memorized her schedule. I knew exactly when she left for school, what route she took." "You were planning it." "I guess I was. Though I didn't admit it to myself. I'd take days off work, drive past her school, Watch her. I'd park near her house in the morning. I told myself I was just looking out for her. But I knew what I really wanted. What happened on October 15th? Walsh took a shaky breath. I called in sick that morning. I'd been planning it for weeks, though I kept telling myself I wouldn't do it. I drove to a spot near Amy's route and waited. When I saw her walking, I pulled over and offered her a ride. And she got in? Of course. I was her uncle. She trusted me completely. She smiled and thanked me and got in like it was the most natural thing in the world. Chen felt her stomach turn. Where did you take her? To Mill Creek. I knew those woods. I knew exactly where to go. A spot where we wouldn't be seen. What did you tell Amy? I told her I wanted to show her something. A deer I'd seen. She loved animals, so of course she wanted to see it. She followed me into the woods, chattering about school, completely unaware of what I was planning. Walsh's voice broke. He put his face in his hands. What happened then? When we got to the clearing, I tried to kiss her. I put my hand on her face. She pulled away. She looked confused. She said, Uncle David, what are you doing? I told her I loved her, that I'd always loved her. What did Amy do? End quote. She got scared. She told me to stop. She tried to walk away. I grabbed her arm, and she started yelling, telling me to let go, threatening to tell her parents, and I panicked. Walsh looked up at Chen, face wet with tears. I couldn't let her tell. If she told Linda, if she told Robert, my life would be over. So I had to stop her. How did you stop her? I hit her. She fell. She was crying, scared. I got on top of her and told her she couldn't tell anyone. But she was screaming, trying to get away. So I put my hands around her throat to make her stop screaming. But she kept struggling. So I found a rope I had in my truck, and he couldn't finish. You strangled her. I just wanted her to stop screaming. But she kept struggling, and I kept squeezing. And then she stopped moving. And then what did you do? Walsh closed his eyes. I realized what I'd done. I'd killed her. I'd killed Amy, my niece. I sat there, holding her body, and I couldn't believe it. But you didn't call for help. She was already dead. So what did you do? I raped her. Walsh's voice was barely audible. She was already dead. But I did what I'd been wanting to do. And then I couldn't believe what I'd become. Chen fought back bile. What did you do with Amy's body? I positioned her carefully, covered her with leaves and branches. I didn't want to just leave her lying there. And her belongings? I took them. In the moment, I thought I needed to take anything with evidence. But later, I realized I kept them because I wanted to remember her. Remember that moment when she was mine, even if it was wrong. Chen let the silence sit. Walsh was crying openly, body shaking. What did you do after you left Mill Creek? I went home. I showered. I burned my clothes. I tried to act normal. And when Linda called that afternoon to tell me Amy was missing, I pretended to be shocked. I went to their house and held my sister while she cried, and I promised her we'd find Amy, knowing you'd killed her, knowing I'd killed her. And for the next 33 years, you've been living with that knowledge. I know it's unforgivable, but I did love Linda. I did love that family, and I've been punishing myself every day. Chen leaned forward, voice hard. You haven't been punishing yourself, Mr. Walsh. You've been getting away with murder. You've been living your life while Amy stayed 14 forever. Don't pretend this has been penance. Walsh flinched. Why did you keep Amy's belongings? Walsh looked at the items. I couldn't let go of her completely. Those were the only pieces of her I had. I'd take them out sometimes, Look at them. Remember that morning. It was sick, but I couldn't throw them away. You polished the locket. You maintained the backpack. Yes. Did you ever go back to Mill Creek? Walsh nodded slowly. Many times, especially in the early years. I'd go there at night and just sit where it happened. Chen felt physically ill. Did you ever consider confessing every single day, especially when I'd see Linda on the anniversary, when she'd cry and ask why? I wanted to tell her, but I couldn't. I was too much of a coward. Chen stood up, gathering evidence. David Walsh, you're under arrest for the first-degree murder of Amy Lynn Smith. You're also charged with criminal sexual conduct and kidnapping. You'll be arraigned this afternoon. Walsh looked up. I'm sorry. I know that doesn't mean anything, but I am sorry. Every day of my life, I've been sorry. Chen looked at him with cold contempt. You should be sorry, but sorry doesn't address what you've done. You didn't just kill Amy. You've been killing your sister slowly for 33 years. She walked to the door, then turned back. Detective Morrison, who originally investigated Amy's case, retired in 1985. He never solved her murder, and it haunted him. He died 2 years ago, still believing he'd failed Amy. I hope you think about that. Chen left the interview room. The confession recorded. The case solved. After 33 years, Amy Smith had finally identified her killer. But the hardest part was yet to come. Someone had to tell Linda Smith that her brother was the monster who'd killed her daughter. Chen drove to Millbrook that afternoon, accompanied by Chief Harris, now in his 80s. Linda now lived in a small apartment on Oak Street. Chen knocked at 4:30 p.m. Linda Smith answered. 72 years old, hair completely gray, face lined with age and grief. She looked at Chen's badge, at Chief Harris's familiar face. You've found something, Linda said. May we come in, Mrs. Smith? Linda's apartment was small but comfortable. Photos covered every surface, family photos, pictures of Amy. And in several photos, David Walsh appeared, Uncle David at Christmas, at Amy's birthday party, helping with home repairs. The monster, hiding in plain sight. They sat in Linda's living room. Chen began the impossible task of explaining. Mrs. Smith, we've made an arrest in Amy's murder case. Linda's hand flew to her mouth, eyes filled with tears. After all these years? Who? We were able to extract DNA from evidence collected in 1979. We identified the perpetrator definitively. Who? Did I know him? This was the moment. Chen took a deep breath. Mrs. Smith, the DNA evidence matched a blood sample collected in 1979 from a family member. Your brother, David Walsh. He confessed this morning to murdering Amy in October 1979. The sound that came from Linda Smith was inhuman, a wail of pure anguish from the depths of her soul. She doubled over as if physically struck. No, not David. Not my brother. He loved Amy. He helped us search for her. He's been there for me for 33 years. But even as Linda protested, Chen could see her mind working, reviewing 33 years of memories through this terrible lens. I held him at Amy's funeral, Linda said, voice breaking. He helped carry her coffin. Mrs. Smith, I'm so sorry. How? Why? Chen explained, as gently as possible, what Walsh had confessed. That he'd been obsessed with Amy. That he'd planned the attack. That he'd killed her when she threatened to tell. He's been here, Linda said, voice hollow. In this apartment. He was here 3 days ago for Sunday dinner. He ate at my table. He said he loved me. The full scope of David Walsh's betrayal was almost incomprehensible. Did he hurt other children? We're investigating. So far, no evidence of other victims. All this time, Linda said, staring at Amy's photo. I thought if we could just find who did it, we could have closure. But this, how do you find peace with this? Chen had no answer. I need to see him, Linda said suddenly. I need to ask him. Why? I don't think that's a good idea right now. You're in shock. 33 years. Linda's voice rose, anger breaking through. I've had 33 years of not knowing. Now I know. And you want me to wait? I need to see him. I need him to tell me why. Linda, I understand, Chief Harris said, but David is in custody. He's been charged with first-degree murder. There are rules. I don't care about rules. That's my brother, and he killed my daughter. The room fell silent. Linda was crying, body shaking. Chen sat with her, offered tissues, let her cry. After a long while, Linda spoke again, voice filled with different pain. I introduced them. When Amy was born, I put her in David's arms. He looked down at her and smiled, and said she was beautiful. And I was so happy my daughter would have such a wonderful uncle. Linda looked at Chen with haunted eyes. I gave her to him. I trusted him with her. Every time I asked him to drive her somewhere, I was putting her in danger. This is my fault. No, Chen said firmly. This is not your fault. You couldn't have known. You're not responsible for what your brother chose to do. But I should have known. A mother should know. Predators are very good at hiding what they are. They're especially good at hiding from people who love them. You couldn't have known. But Chen could see Linda didn't believe her. Linda was already reviewing every memory, building a case against herself. This was another of David Walsh's crimes, poisoning Linda's memories, making her question every moment of trust. Chen stayed with Linda for 2 hours, until her pastor arrived, until neighbors appeared. The news was already spreading through Millbrook. Before Chen left, Linda grabbed her hand. Find out if there were others. If David hurt other children, those families deserve to know. We will, Chen promised. Tommy Smith got the call from his mother at 6:30 p.m. He was at home in Chicago making dinner when his phone rang. Hi, Mom, he said, cradling the phone while stirring pasta. What's up? Tommy. Just that one word. But he could hear something broken. Mom? What's wrong? They found him. They found who killed Amy. Tommy's hand froze. The spoon dropped. What? They arrested him today. They have DNA evidence, he confessed. Tommy sat down heavily. After 33 years. Who? His mother was crying. Long pause before she answered. It was David. David who? Uncle David. Your Uncle David. My brother. Tommy felt punched in the stomach. Memories flooded back. Uncle David at Amy's funeral. Uncle David helping search. Uncle David at every gathering. Uncle David teaching him football, showing him tools, helping him become a man after his sister died. He confessed, his mother said. He told them everything. He killed her. And then he spent 33 years lying to us. Tommy felt nauseous. I looked up to him. After Amy died, he was the one who helped me. I know. I invited him to my college graduation. He came to my apartment when I moved to Chicago. I talked to him about everything. And the whole time, he'd killed my sister? Yes. Tommy stood, started pacing. Too big, too terrible. His whole life shaped by Amy's death. And now, learning that the man who'd helped him through that trauma was the one who'd created it. I need to come home. I need to come to Millbrook. Tommy booked a flight for the next morning. That night, he didn't sleep. He reviewed every memory of Uncle David through this horrible perspective. He remembered being 11, devastated, not talking for months, Uncle David had been patient, eventually coaxing him back into speaking. Your sister loved you very much. She'd want you to be okay. She'd want you to live a good life. Tommy had treasured those words. They'd been a lifeline. And now they were poison. How dare David Walsh talk about what Amy would have wanted when he was the one who'd killed her? Manipulation. All of it was manipulation. When Tommy arrived in Millbrook the next morning, the town was in chaos. News vans everywhere. Reporters doing stand-ups. The Millbrook Gazette had rushed out a special edition. David Walsh, arrested. In 1979, Amy Smith murder. Tommy went straight to his mother's apartment. Linda looked like she'd aged 10 years overnight. They held each other without speaking for a long time. I can't believe it. I know. Did you ever suspect? Linda shook her head. Never. He was my little brother. How could I suspect him? Late that afternoon, Tommy asked a question he'd been afraid to ask. Mom, do you think he did anything to me? When I was a kid? Linda looked stricken. Oh God, Tommy, I don't think so. The detective said they're investigating, but so far they think Amy was his only victim. But he was around me constantly. If he could do what he did to Amy, I don't think he did anything to you. I would have known. I was watching after Amy died. But Tommy could see the doubt in his mother's eyes. How could she be sure? How could she be sure of anything anymore? This was another of David Walsh's legacies, poisoning every memory, every relationship, every moment of trust. David Walsh was arraigned on the 29th of November, 2012, charged with first-degree murder, criminal sexual conduct in the first degree, and kidnapping. He appeared via video link, wearing orange jumpsuit, looking small and defeated. His court-appointed attorney entered a plea of not guilty despite Walsh's confession. Judge Thornton set bail at $5 million, effectively ensuring Walsh would remain in custody. Preliminary hearing scheduled for January 2013. Over the next months, the defense worked to build their case. They reviewed the confession. No procedural violations. Chen had followed protocol perfectly. They hired forensic experts to challenge the DNA evidence, arguing that evidence stored 33 years couldn't be reliable. But state experts countered every argument. The match was undeniable. They argued Walsh's confession resulted from mental instability, but psychiatric evaluation found Walsh completely competent. By March 2013, it was clear the defense couldn't win. The evidence was overwhelming. Walsh had confessed. A jury would convict and might recommend the death penalty. The defense attorney met with Walsh. David, we need to talk about a plea deal. The prosecution will take the death penalty off the table if you plead guilty. You'd get life without parole. Walsh was silent for a long time. He looked older than his 67 years. Hair completely white. Weight lost. If I plead guilty, do I have to testify? There'd be a sentencing hearing. Victim impact statements. You'd have opportunity to speak if you wanted, but no full trial. And if I go to trial, you'll lose. The evidence is insurmountable. A jury will convict you, and they'll probably recommend the death penalty. Walsh closed his eyes. I just want it to be over. I've been living with this for 33 years. I'm tired. On the 15th of March 2013, David Walsh formally changed his plea to guilty on all charges. A sentencing hearing was scheduled for the 8th of November, 2013, 34 years, almost to the day after Amy Smith's murder. The 8th of November 2013. The Millbrook County Courthouse was packed beyond capacity. Reporters lined the walls. Television cameras broadcast live. This was the end of a story that had haunted Millbrook for 34 years. This was justice, finally served. David Walsh was led into the courtroom in handcuffs and prison clothes. He looked at the floor, refusing eye contact. Judge Thornton called the hearing to order. We're here for the sentencing of David Michael Walsh, who has pleaded guilty to first-degree murder, criminal sexual conduct, and kidnapping in connection with the death of Amy Lynn Smith. Before I pass sentence, I'll hear victim impact statements. Linda Smith walked to the witness stand on shaking legs, 73 years old, wearing a simple black dress, face pale but composed. She was sworn in, took her seat, and looked directly at her brother for the first time since his arrest. David Walsh refused to meet her eyes. Linda opened her folder. Her hands trembled as she began. Your Honor, David Walsh is my brother. For 67 years I loved him. I trusted him. I was wrong about all of it. On the 15th of October 1979, David murdered my daughter. He sexually assaulted her. He strangled her. He left her body in the woods. And then he came to my house and pretended to grieve with me. For 34 years, David sat across from me at Sunday dinners, attended every anniversary of Amy's death, comforted me while I cried, and never once told me the truth. You didn't just kill Amy, you killed my ability to trust. You killed my belief in family. Every memory I have of my brother is now poisoned. Every moment of comfort you provided was a lie. David's crimes also took my son from me in a way. Tommy grew up traumatized, shaped by his sister's murder. And David was there, helping him, pretending to care. Tommy looked up to you. He loved you, and you let him. Knowing what you'd done to his sister, you didn't just take Amy from me. You took the last 34 years of my life. You took my ability to remember my daughter without also remembering your betrayal. But most of all, I hope Amy knows that you were finally caught, that justice was finally served, that her voice was finally heard. You silenced her in 1979, but she spoke from the grave, through science, through people who refused to let her be forgotten. You lose, David. You spent 34 years thinking you'd gotten away with it, but you didn't win. Amy won. She identified you. She made sure you'd pay. And now you'll die in prison, alone, forgotten, unloved. While Amy's memory will live on, she'll be remembered as a bright, kind, loving girl whose life was stolen too soon. You'll be remembered as the monster who killed her. That's justice. Linda finished and carefully closed her folder. She looked at her brother one more time. This time, David Walsh raised his head and met her eyes. What passed between them was beyond words. A lifetime of sibling love destroyed in an instant. Trust broken beyond any possibility of repair. Linda left the witness stand without looking back. Thomas Smith took the stand next. David Walsh helped raise me after my sister was killed. When I was 11 and my world fell apart, David was there. He spent hours with me, helping me remember that life could go on. I loved him for that. For 33 years, I believed that David Walsh had helped save my life. Now I know the truth. David Walsh didn't save me. He was the one who destroyed me in the first place. He murdered my sister, and then he used my grief as a mask. You taught me how to throw a football, how to use tools, and the whole time, you'd killed my sister. You'd raped and murdered a 14-year-old girl, and then you pretended to teach me about being a good person. Every good memory I have is now suspect. Every moment of happiness is tainted. You didn't just kill Amy. You killed my innocence, my ability to trust. I hope you live a long time in prison. I hope you have years to think about what you did. Though I doubt you will, because feeling regret requires having a conscience. The worst part is that I can't even grieve for you properly. I can't mourn the loss of my uncle because that person never existed. The uncle I loved was a fiction, a character you played. So all I can say is good riddance. I hope your name is forgotten, and I hope that somehow Amy knows that you were finally caught." Tommy left the stand, face wet with tears, and took a seat beside his mother. They held hands, united in grief and anger. Several others spoke. Sarah Mitchell, Amy's best friend, Dr. Morrison, the veterinarian, teachers, neighbors, friends, all speaking about the girl taken from them. Finally, Judge Thornton turned to David Walsh. "Mr. Walsh, you have the right to make a statement. Do you wish to speak?" Walsh's attorney whispered to him. Walsh shook his head. Then, after a long moment, he stood. "I'd like to speak." Judge Thornton nodded. "Proceed." Walsh turned to face the gallery. "I don't expect forgiveness. What I did is unforgivable. I can't explain why I did it. I was obsessed with Amy. I couldn't control those feelings. When Amy threatened to tell, I panicked. I killed her to protect myself. It was pure selfishness and evil. I've lived with the guilt every day, but I was too afraid to confess. Now the consequences are here, and I accept them. I deserve to spend the rest of my life in prison. But I want Amy to be remembered, not for how she died, but for who she was. She was bright and kind and full of potential. She loved animals and dreamed of being a veterinarian. That's who Amy was. I'm sorry. I know that doesn't mean anything, but I am sorry." Walsh sat down. The courtroom was silent. Judge Thornton reviewed her notes, then looked up. "David Michael Walsh, you have pleaded guilty to first-degree murder, first-degree criminal sexual conduct, and kidnapping in the death of Amy Lynn Smith. These crimes are among the most heinous I have encountered. You murdered a child, your own niece. You sexually assaulted her. You took items as trophies, and then you spent 34 years living among her family, accepting their love while concealing your guilt. Your crime didn't end with Amy's death. It continued every day for 34 years. Every family gathering, every anniversary, every moment you spent with your sister and nephew, those were all extensions of your original crime. I hereby sentence you to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. You will die in prison. You will never again walk free. You will never again know the simple pleasures of everyday life that you stole from Amy Smith. I hope you use your time in prison to reflect on what you've done. I hope you spend every remaining day thinking about Amy not as your victim, but as the person she was and could have been. Justice has been delayed, but it has not been denied. This court is adjourned." The gavel came down. David Walsh was led from the courtroom in handcuffs, his head bowed, his life effectively over. In the gallery, Linda Smith collapsed into her son's arms, crying tears of relief and grief and rage and something that might have been closure. After 34 years, Amy Smith's killer had finally faced justice. David Walsh was transported to Kinross Correctional Facility, where he would spend the rest of his life in protective custody. Prison psychologists describe him as emotionally flat, disconnected from the magnitude of his crimes. He shows no empathy for the Smith family. Linda Smith sold her apartment in Millbrook and moved to Chicago to be closer to Tommy. She joined a support group for families of homicide victims. She found some peace in knowing Amy's killer had been caught, that justice had been served, even if it came 34 years too late. "I can't forgive him," Linda says, "but I can move forward now. For 34 years, I was stuck in that October morning. Now I know." It's a terrible answer, but it's an answer. Tommy, now 56, has become an advocate for cold case victims. He speaks at conferences, works with legislators to improve evidence preservation laws. He's channeled his grief into productive action. I'll never get my sister back, but I can help ensure other families don't have to wait as long as we did. That's how I honor Amy. Detective Sarah Chen received commendations for solving the case. She went on to solve 11 more cold cases using similar DNA analysis techniques. The Amy Smith case remains her most significant success. Amy taught me never to give up. Science advances. Technology improves. What was impossible yesterday becomes possible today. Every victim deserves that chance. The Amy Smith Foundation was established in 2014 by Linda and Tommy Smith. The foundation has two goals: supporting families of cold case victims and funding DNA analysis of evidence from unsolved murders. They've funded DNA testing in over 50 cold cases, resulting in 12 arrests and 9 convictions. Several states have passed Amy's laws requiring evidence, preservation, and regular cold case reviews. Amy's story has been featured in numerous true crime documentaries, podcasts, and books. Sarah Mitchell started a scholarship in Amy's name for young women pursuing veterinary medicine. The Millbrook High School Library has a memorial to Amy. Students learn about her case in criminal justice and forensic science classes. At Mill Creek, where Amy's body was found, the community created a small memorial garden. A bench sits, surrounded by purple irises. Amy's favorite. A plaque reads, "In memory of Amy Lynn Smith, 1965 to 1979. Her voice was silenced, but never forgotten." Linda Smith visits the memorial on Amy's birthday every year. "I wish I could have those 34 years back," Linda said in an interview. "But I'm grateful we finally know. I'm grateful Amy's voice was finally heard. I'm grateful she got justice, even if it took most of my lifetime." Amy Lynn Smith, who never got to fulfill her dream of becoming a veterinarian, has become something more through her death, a symbol of perseverance, a catalyst for change, a reminder that justice, while sometimes delayed, can still be served. Her voice, silenced at 14, has spoken louder in death than it ever could have in life. Through science, through the dedication of investigators who refused to forget her, through a family that turned grief into purpose, Amy Smith has ensured that even the most carefully hidden crimes can eventually be exposed. Amy would have been 59 years old today. Linda reflected on what would have been Amy's birthday in 2024. She might have been a successful veterinarian. She might have had children, grandchildren. She might have lived a full life. David Walsh took all of that from her. He stole her future, everything she might have become. But through her death, she's touched countless lives. She's helped other families find justice. She's advanced forensic science. She's changed laws. She was my daughter. She was Tommy's sister. She was a 14-year-old girl with dreams that should have happened. But she's also a symbol now, a reminder that justice can be patient, that truth can wait, that even after 33 years of silence, the dead can still speak. Amy Lynn Smith. Her voice was silenced, but through science and determination and love, she spoke again, and she'll never be forgotten. If you've stayed with us through Amy's entire journey, from that October morning in 1979 to the justice delivered in 2013, thank you. Stories like Amy's remind us why we must never stop seeking truth, why we must never let victims be forgotten, and why science combined with human determination can speak for those who can no longer speak for themselves. If you believe in the power of justice, no matter how long it takes, please subscribe to this channel and share Amy's story. Together, we keep these voices alive. Justice was delayed, but it was not denied.